And then really taking a look at it, how like really with everything that happened, how it changed the business. But, ultimately when I look back at it, there's a saying that I really believe in, which is things aren't done to you, they're done for you.
Hey, what's up? I'm your host, Bob Thompson, and welcome to Unleashing Greatness, the #1 show for people who are ready to finally start or scale their own business and do it successfully. Over the last 9 years, I've scaled my little basement business to 15 plus locations and several other businesses, but it hasn't been without trial and error and lots of adversity. I'm here to share with you the strategies and tools that actually work when running a business and how not to lose yourself while doing it. So if you're ready to unleash the greatness within you, let's dive into today's show.
Welcome back to Unleashing Greatness. I want to dive into today about how I lost $10 million, as this was definitely a pretty pivotal and big thing for me. And it was actually recent too. It was in the last 2 years. Yeah, I think it was like last 2 years. Now, before I dive into today, I do want to make an ask out of you. If you have been liking the show, if you're getting value out of it, if you get value out of today, if you could just please share it with somebody who you think is going to get some value from it. With that said, I want to dive right in. About 2 years ago, I was actually in the process of looking for investment into my company. I was actually looking to sell a part of it so I could really help it grow. Or at least that's what I thought at the time. And it took me a little bit to get there. And ultimately what ended up happening is I had a $10 million offer on the business, a $10 million valuation, and they weren't going to buy 100% of it. I was going to stay on board. So, I actually had two offers, one for 60%, one for 75%. And I'll tell you kind of the details of that. But today's not exactly how that structure happened or things I really would have learned from it or if I was going to do that again. But at the time, the decision that I made was, hey, I wanted to sell part of my business. And reason this important is I want to bring up like why I actually got to that point is here's this business that I built from scratch, who I actually in the beginning especially was like priding myself on not having anybody else involved because I don't play nice necessarily with others. Probably like you, if you're an entrepreneur, you're doing it because like you like to do things your way. Anyway, so I got to the point where I was like, hey, now that I have this franchise, how do I really grow it to the next level? How can I create this and accelerate this bell curve that's supposed to happen in franchising? How can I do that super fast with the assistance of people that have already been there? And the decision that I made at the time was that, hey, you know what? I'm going to bring on some people that already know how to do this. All right. That are going to really, I've done this thing. I've built this business up. I kind of wanted to maybe at the time take a step back and enjoy it, so to speak. And maybe I didn't really quite realize that at the time. And there was also some doubt in my mind on stuff. So I put it up, for, hey, here's this business. Here's the things that we do. And ended up having a couple offers come in. Those offers came in. I actually ended up having 3 over the time period that I had it up. The first one I actually rejected. Ultimately, it came, I think that came when I was like, it was pretty cool because I remember that being a super pivotal moment in business. And you're going to have a few of those as you go through that. You're like, damn, like this is sweet. Here's some freaking validation for the things that I did. And I think I was like 31 when I got that first offer. And then it came in, and then some of the terms that came with it just I wasn't a fan of. So turned it down. And then, a little bit later, had another offer come in and then another offer come in. And both of them valued the business at $10 million. Now, at the time, I had 8 gyms that I owned. I had just really started franchising. So I started, when I initially started the franchise, I awarded about 30 locations in, I don't know, like a 3 or 6 month process. I had 15 or 16 different franchisees. Some of them bought multiple units at one time because on a tangent, especially in the fitness business, in the gym space, I really believe that if you're going to make some serious money out of locations, you can't have just one. You need to have multiple. And I like to keep it simple, one focus, multiple locations. Anyway, So that's kind of like in my franchise, in my model, in Legion, that's what I encourage. Like, hey, you can make good money with one, but you're going to make much better money and kind of the money that you're going to get from the fruits of your labor out of having 3 locations. So I had a bunch of people do that. And I don't remember at the time, I think maybe I might have had like 1, 2, or 3 opened or something like that. I don't 100% remember anymore, but I had those offers come in. And, how I lost the $10 million is I was probably, 45 days out from closing. We did a ton of due diligence. The LOIs were over and stuff like that. And then really it was going to be a fast process because a lot of that work was already done even going into it, into like, hey, like essentially if you're getting an investment or you're selling your business, you're probably going to get something like an LOI. That LOI is a letter of intent. It's like, hey, here's what we see. Here's like what we're offering and stuff like that. Here's some of the terms. Here's how it's going to look for this process to continue. And, if you're looking to sell or get an investment in your business, it's not generally a quick process. It can happen quickly, but it's not going to be that quick of a process. So, and I was completely unfamiliar with it. So I had a broker, that was kind of leading me through the process. So, get these, I get these offers, and then, for sure as an entrepreneur, as like a young 30-year-old, I'm like, damn, like here's this 8-figure offer. The businesses were doing well and, had treated me very well over the years. But then here's this like large 8-figure sum that I was like, damn, like that's really cool. And getting to know them, things were looking like, it was exciting for the next chapter because this was actually going to be private equity. They were going to really put a lot of the stuff, and it'll kind of get to part of what I'll be sharing is how I fell through and really some of the lessons from it. They were going to be putting in really great, like, executive team, so to speak, and really fueling the growth. And it was going to be really exciting because the plan was like, hey, let's build this freaking thing some more for the next 5 to 10 years. And then we'll all take that second exit or whatever and as sell to like venture capital. And this had been a world of business I had no idea, but it was obviously super exciting for me at that time. Anyway, fast forward, getting super close, 45 days from closing. And unfortunately, the timing kind of ran out. And by that, I mean, the pandemic kicked off. So I was just about ready to sign everything, make the decisions and stuff like that. And then COVID hit and the world decided to become shut down. At first, we all agreed. We're like, hey, cool, great idea. Let's do it. And there was some actually awesome stuff that happened within the business as a result of it. As far as excitement for somebody like me, who's like an entrepreneur, is like, hell yeah, let's create this brand new thing. Let's take these brick and mortars and over like the course of a weekend, turn it into a virtual and online program and really save all these jobs and really deliver an awesome product and experience for our members. But that was cool. But an uncool part of it was the deals fell through because I was deciding between 2 different investment people, and I made the mind, and it was getting really close, and there's some stuff that we needed to clean up. And that's really what I'm going to share today was like, why didn't this happen faster? And also what led me to wanting to make this decision. But ultimately when it happened, the first person was like, hey, we're out. I was like, I get it. And the other person was kind of like, hey, no big deal. We have 19 businesses within our portfolio and, some are getting impacted. We're just going to ride this out a little bit and see where it goes. And, they got a lot of stuff they need to take care of, obviously with all these changes that happened, but we'll touch base and, and reconfigure and get it done. Well, then obviously as it continued, and especially brick and mortar businesses and businesses on the East Coast in particular, we're pretty much told like even though you're helping save people's lives and get them healthy, you shouldn't be operating, and we're going to keep everybody indoors. It had a large impact on the fitness space. Obviously, you can hear there's still some frustration in it, especially as that still continues to this day. And to a certain degree. But, they were like, hey, we just don't feel comfortable anymore, especially, or at least at this current time, investing into like brick and mortar gyms. I was like, hey, I totally get it. So after all this time getting ready, really trying to really secure this deal and, dealing with those internal struggles of, do I do this? Like, shoot, I'm no longer going to be the majority owner and all this. But then looking at, hey, I think back to like all those episodes of watching with Shark Tank of like people have done it, been there. It's really gonna assist in the true future for Legion and where it could go. But ultimately, they were like, hey, we don't feel comfortable. I was like, I totally get it. So there it was, squashed. So it went from at one point having 3 offers for $10 million on the business to then being like, hey, not gonna happen. And then really taking a look at it, how like really with everything that happened, how it changed the business. But ultimately, when I look back at it, there's a saying that I really believe in, which is things aren't done to you, they're done for you. And that's really, I really truly believe that, because as a result of that, everything in life has gotten, you can't see me drawing at my table, has gotten significantly better. So it's like, hey, that deal didn't go through, which is actually probably a good thing. However, why, what brought me to that point where I actually got to where I was, I started this basement in the business, and I was like, I'm not going to, sell this thing or bring other partners in or anything like that under the grand scale or anything of that nature, to then actually changing that. So what actually happened? What actually brought that about? And I really, I reflected over that now what is it, like 2 years? And whereas now I see that actually is a great thing that it didn't go through. But also it was like, what had to happen to that point where it got there? And which obviously it, crushed me at the time. It really got me to a point where I was like, all right, here's this amazing thing that was about to happen that gave validation for all these years of really relentless sacrifice of time and all sorts of other stuff, which I love doing, so don't get me wrong. But it was like, hey, I built this freaking thing up. Here is this point where it's about to have like a large payoff for it, and then continue. And there's going to be another great thing at the end, and the brand was going to really just grow significantly. Then it's like, all right, well, that fell through. Oh, and on top of that, my business is currently fucked in the current environment. So it was like a double whammy, where then I really had to look at the business and be like, all right, I need to make some significant changes, because the way that I operate now isn't going to work when, especially a brick and mortar gym business, when it's significantly impacted by the current environment. So it led to a lot of changes, which also then led me to being like, well, what do I really want? What do I really want in life? And also, what got me to this point where, looking back at it, the first thing was like, I got freaking burnt out. The reason that I was looking for that investment was I got burnt out. There was, starting the business in 2012, and I think just the nature of just how I get with things, I became obsessive. It was what I did. It was all I did. It was like, I loved to work, and I still actually really love to work. However, there wasn't that balance in life. The real sole focus was business, was growing business, and also getting that financial success. And those things were happening, but still, as those things were happening, there was parts of me that were like withering away. And I don't know, I wouldn't say dying. That's a little extreme and dramatic, but I can be a little dramatic. However, that area of my life was growing, but there wasn't the other areas. And even like fitness. So fitness has obviously been a big part of my life, since I started working out. I think outside of then when I got burnt out and all these things happened, I then went on this, 6-week road trip with my dogs, where I pretty much didn't work out for probably the first time. I didn't work out for 6 weeks, or I think I actually made it 4 weeks before I was like, I need to get a workout. But it was like that 4 weeks was the first time since when I started lifting in high school when I was like 15 or whatever. And then, or 16 or whatever, however old I was when I started. And for really work, I might have taken a week off, since 2012. And even prior to starting my business, I constantly worked, for the people that I worked for. But when I started my business in 2012, maybe took a week off. But when I took that week off, it wasn't, I would still be doing stuff in the business, not instead of that I had to be in the business, because I did set it up where I was outside of the business and working on the business. But I was still because that's what I was enjoying. I was a lot of times my vacations or my time off was maybe with other entrepreneurs and especially with other gym owners. And then we're ending up constantly talking business and thinking tactics and strategies and stuff. So this was probably the first time that I actually took time off from that. And I was just hey, I got this business, I got that business, it's running, it's good. I'm going to take time off. And I hopped in my truck with my dogs and went out west and then camped in Wyoming and Montana and Idaho and just drove through other parks and stuff before I ended up coming back, which was awesome. And, it was at that point I was man, I'm just freaking burnt out. I got to the point where I focused so much on business. And as a result too, I put a lot of my self-worth in how the business was doing, how much money I was making, as opposed to really working on the other areas of myself. And I think that there's, I don't know, maybe a part of people that get into fitness or even get into business, there is that part of them. It's where they're looking for that, creating that value elsewhere. You get into, I know for me, when I started working out, I had no self-esteem. I had no confidence because, I was a super skinny kid. I was 115 pounds. And for some reason, I, at the time was if I'm not jacked, people aren't going to like me, I didn't have the confidence in myself. And I think there also sometimes goes into in that, for me, it definitely carried over into business as well. I was super happy prior. And then I was hey, I got obsessed with it. I wanted to become the best at it. So it's all I did. And then I was constantly pushing that. I hit a level of success and I'd push it further and I'd push it further and I'd push it further until I, never really truly kind of acknowledging the things that happened. So I ended up as a result of it burning out because I focused so much on the business and financial aspect, but not on developing myself. Even though I was working out, I really had lost the love for it, the passion for it, but I was just I was doing it all the time. And I would have bursts where I really enjoyed it. But it's not because it was just something that was part of me at that point in time. So I would do it, but I wasn't focusing on other areas of myself. I wasn't focusing on spiritual areas for sure. That was something that happened as a result of this, which I'm super grateful for. So it's actually, again, things aren't done to you, they're done for you. I was actually able to have my faith come back as a result of all this happening. And I also wasn't working on really relationships. I would often say that, and I think entrepreneurs have a tendency to say this to ourselves, it's, when we start, because I've said this, when I started dating somebody or whatever, they don't or they can't understand the lifestyle that an entrepreneur has because they have to work. It's no, it's you have no balance. You have no boundaries for yourself. You shouldn't be on your phone 24/7. You don't need to be on your phone 24/7 because I got to check this. I got to do this. Oh, this question and that. No, you got to have boundaries. So I was, as a result, not having great relationships as well. They started off great. And then of course I would go back to this business thing. So there's those areas, and even then family too. I lived close to family, but I didn't really see them. I actually, now that I live in Montana, have a better relationship with my family. We talk more frequently than when I lived 45 minutes away from all of them. And it's because my focus was purely, and I do think that this kind of is necessary in business, but there's a better way to do it. So it's I went to some crazy extremes doing that. And as a result, when I had this sole focus and then this event occurred, that was the final straw, which was hey, I need to reevaluate how I'm really doing this thing called life. But prior to that, I got burnt out because this was my sole focus. And then also the business had gotten to a point, which made me really the second thing, it got to a point where my weak areas were what was holding me back. And I wasn't doing what I should be doing as best as possible to really strengthen them. So I had built this awesome business. It was no longer one location. I had 8 locations that were doing pretty freaking well. And then, I ended up franchising it. And then I have, a supplement company and a marketing company that really are assisting that business. I do have some other squirrel ideas that would, take me elsewhere. It's like some of the other business I have now. But like that was still like mostly the sole focus was, hey, growing this. But it got into a point where, although I was a constant learner, like I was what was holding it back. I was the limiting factor on the growth. So, I wouldn't go to other areas, but there was also parts of me that knew where I was screwing up, but also didn't want to admit it. So the business started like kind of becoming where these issues were popping up. I love marketing and I love sales and I'm a great trainer. And then I really, but in the beginning, I didn't focus enough on like the delivery and the experience. So then it was like, hey, once we get these clients in, how can we freaking wow them and keep them coming? But then there's other parts of your business, like how do the books look? What's the finance like? What does your accounting look like? And then as you get to the same, like I had 50 employees. I had, this gym business and then this franchise business. And then I also had the supplement company that were like, all had employees and stuff of that nature. It was, how to focus on the areas of growth and get to the point where, if you've read Traction and then, Rocket Fuel, which came from the author Gino Wickman, talks about like visionaries and integrators. Like I was definitely a visionary. But I still wanted to do those areas that I wasn't good at, where like early on, or years prior to this, was like, hey, you need to get a CEO. Hey, you need to get a COO. And I would think about it or do it. And then there was like that relinquishing control and power was difficult for me. I was like, I can do it. Why do I need this? And then those things came and bit me in the ass. So there was a lot of like fixing that had to go around. So we have this awesome business that just blew up. And then, we were going through a lot of rocky phases that, for the last, year or two prior to that, especially as I'll talk about the kind of the third thing of kind of like, hey, what attributed this thing really not going through? But, I didn't have those areas like we're working on it. And instead of being like, hey, that's never going to be an area of my strength, let me bring somebody in that's going to be great at that. Like obviously, and it was interesting because in other areas of the business, I was able to do that. Once I opened up, like I fell in love with the side of business and less in love with actually training people. So the first thing that I did was remove myself from coaching. And then the coaching got better because that's what people loved and that's what they were really good at. And then, I removed myself from the admin stuff because I hated doing that stuff. And there were people that liked doing it and were good at doing it. And as we grew, and then, eventually got people that were supposed to be, that C-level leadership team and stuff. And, I was still like head of marketing or whatever, but I got those, brought those people up, but there were certain levels that like, I wasn't good enough at training them at certain things. So I don't remember what it is, but if you're an 8 at it, how are you going to get somebody to become a 10? You can't. You have to get somebody else that's like an expert at it. So there's a certain part of the business where I should have been bringing in people that were experts at it. We're 10s where I was 7s or 8s and stuff of that nature. And then letting them do their thing and developing it. And I moved a little bit slower on that. And the crazy thing was the cool thing was we did get to a point where I actually, we kind of looked at all the rocky areas. Oh crap, the payroll was just outrageous in the business. And like, hey, these constraints were happening and stuff like that. And hey, it looks like we're really good and kind of fixed a lot of the issues. And the next year was going to be crazy, awesome, good growth. And then the pandemic hit, So I've had all that time of having to fix these issues and, fix the mistakes that I made. And then, of course, once that kind of like event occurred and this fell through, it was just like, hit me in the head, but, looking back at it, those are things that I was actually told by coaches and mentors and knew I should have done was bringing in those people a lot earlier and stepping back and letting them do their thing. And then me focusing on the things that I like to do, like the bigger picture, the vision and stuff. I should have done that. And I didn't. And it actually was one of the reasons for sure why the deals didn't go through, because if I had these things in place, stuff would have moved a lot faster, when these, LOIs and the interest and stuff came in, especially as kind of like we were going through the due diligence in another area, like these wouldn't have been those issues. The other big thing, which was, kind of something you probably hear from a lot of people, and, I get it from a lot of my coach mentors. But the other thing that kind of derailed me in the process was I got into, a year, 2 years, whatever prior, I had shifted my focus of my main business and I went into a brand new business. So I owned gyms and I operated gyms, these boot camp gyms. And then I decided after opening up to a certain point, I was like, I had my 8 locations. So make money, put it in, open a location. We'd be cash flow positive or profitable by the time I opened up. So I was like, cool, doing that. I was looking for new challenges. But I also got to the point where I was like, how can I grow Legion, impact more people, create more opportunities? And how can I really create this really, mega brand and do it without it having to be me, without having to be me who opens the locations or me who has to put the cash forward and stuff like that. To do that, how can I do this? And I saw a mentor of mine had franchised and had massive success. So I was like, hey, you know what? It's working for him. I'm going to do it as well. I don't know shit about franchising or this business, but how hard can it be? I know this business, so why don't I do that? And it doesn't work like that. Franchising is a completely different business. And so I did know from advice from others, like, hey, your business is going to be your core business is probably going to be impacted as a result of this. That's okay. But then I got to the point where I had just such differing demands from these businesses. And since I never really truly got a CEO and all that stuff, and I also knew this at one point prior to all this happening, interviewed for those things and never even actually, I had, the people that I could have put in place and I decided not to. I think part of this is ego, that I've definitely learned over time. A large ego component, which, bit me in the butt. But, so I started this new business, and it's not necessarily an easier business either. So I went into that. And as a result, now my focus was really significantly split, especially because I grew the franchise pretty fast. I awarded a lot, as I said earlier, I awarded a lot of franchises really quickly. And the advice I got from a lot of people that had been franchisors and in franchising, they were like, hey, go really slow. Only award like 3 or 4 locations, try and open up like just 1 or 2 in that first year, figure out the kinks and stuff, and then go forward. And I'm like, what? I don't want to do that. I want to move fast. I want to freaking sell. So I sold a ton of franchises. And then when I opened the first one and she opened up and she did great, I was like, oh, this was great. And the second one opened and they did shitty. I was like, uh-oh. So here's this recipe, here's this formula. It's like, hey, you're bought into this, but then we're not going to follow it. I was like, oh, I got to figure that out. So that's what they were talking about in franchising. That's what they say. Like, here's these kinks that I have, and I got to open up, a ton more. And then also I got to make sure that my gyms are doing well. I got to make sure that they're serving well, finding out the issues of what's going on. And it just became a large attention grabber from both. Whereas one, I could put all my attention in one and I had to focus and like, here was the model, here's what we did, open. I decided to go down this different path and create a brand new business. Whereas the first one wasn't where it needed to be. Although I was like removed, I wasn't actually removed. Maybe I wasn't training people and doing the day-to-day, but I was still really leading the charge, focusing on the marketing aspect of things. And then really still in the component where I was still, building and training and coaching my team. So I had a lot of that going on, and there were still issues that still had to be fixed in the business. So it wasn't quite ready, to do the franchise yet, to be frank. So that was a big thing, which then, kind of split the attention, so some of these areas of focus, that it could have been done, because ultimately, interesting thing was when I went to and I put it up and I was like, hey, this is going to be a great opportunity. We're going to, get all this because here I have these gyms that are making money. I have this, whatever supplement company and stuff like that. But then I also have this franchise where we rewarded a ton. So there's a lot of this upside and we have this formula that's replicable. And then you can just open more and more and more. Like that's going to have a lot of value. Interestingly enough, the people that were actually interested, there was like no value put onto the franchise. So maybe looking back, I don't know, maybe I don't have an experience that like how to like spin that or whatever, but it was interesting because it was almost like it was too early. It was like, hey, yeah, that's great. Like these are the businesses that are actually making a ton of money and are like, you just easily can open one and one and one. Whereas this one, yeah, you've awarded a ton, but most of them aren't even open. I think at the time there was only like a handful. So it's like, this really hasn't, yeah, you've been able to sell them, but have you been able to open them, have them be successful? So I had to essentially shift focus, which was like very growth. It was like, hey, how can I actually make this business where I give them the attention, I fix those issues that are going on where they're maybe struggling or stuff like that, and getting them open, because there was still a lot that was my subject matter expertise, so to speak, with the gyms and not with franchising. So it was a new business. So that was kind of the other thing. Was I got distracted. I got distracted in business, which I think a lot of entrepreneurs do. They look for this new challenge, or they say, hey, this is the path. But then the question is, well, what happened if I just, instead of doing the franchising, opened up a couple more locations? I had that formula down. Like the last 2 locations that I opened, it's like creating those new challenges in business for yourself. Like I opened at the same time. So I was like, I want a little bit more of a challenge. So I remember I opened up 2 locations and bought my first house at the first for the first time. And I think it was in 2017. So I was like, hey, I really, for me as an entrepreneur, like I like having my back up against the wall, and there's 2 options: succeed or fail. And so, I was like, here's a lot of cash at the time tied up in these 3 different things. So, it was interesting and it was fun, but especially when I was going in, I was like, hey, I could figure like easily open up 1 a quarter. So, in this time period of when I kind of like switched from these businesses, what would have happened had I only had this focus where I knew this business? I opened up 2 or 4 more locations. So then we're adding to it. And really at the size of the company, wouldn't have added any more to like the C-level team and stuff of that nature. What would that impact have been actually? And then would I have been able to fix maybe those issues that were kind of came and bit me in the butt? But at the same time, I got to the point where, since there wasn't balance in my life, I wasn't focusing on these other areas, I was burnt out. So I wasn't seeing what I wasn't seeing. It's easy to look back on it now, but it ended up happening. It was, the pandemic was the final kind of straw on it. But it was not like I ever built this business to do that. And I do recommend that if you're building a business, you should always build it to be sold. It's actually what I tell my franchisees. Hey, if you're just because you're buying this business, it's your own business. Yeah, we've given you the formula. It's already been done. It's time tested and proven. You just follow the recipe and you're going to get the cake. But if you do that, you should also build it to be sold. You may not have that intention right now. It may sound crazy. You're like, I just want to leave corporate world or this job that sucks or whatever, and I want to be my own boss. But you still, if you build this business and then all of a sudden you get to the point where you get a pretty good exit, you should take it. That's just how business is. And obviously, unless you're passionate, like, there's different areas, but you should build it to be sold even if you don't plan on selling it. So there was a lot of lessons that I ultimately learned in this process that was, at the time, I was like, it'll happen and stuff like that. When you had the pandemic, I was like, I don't know how I'm going to get back from this. That's definitely the point that I was at. Like, it crushed me, so I remember that's where I was just like, something's not adding up, so as a result of it, I was like, I need to, if I've done all this stuff, it impacted me so significantly, and then it happens. And it's funny because you hear in business, you're like, oh, like stuff like this happens, and you're like, it's not going to happen to me, and then it happens, and the stuff you can't predict. So we couldn't predict this, but then I was like, how can I, here's the situation that occurred. What are the areas that, here's an opportunity actually to kind of improve on the areas. And that's what I did. Like, I was like, burnout. Why was I burnt out? How can I improve those things? And that was a process, obviously, to discover and find out, and just went forward and did those steps. I was like, hey, you know what? Here's what this business is. Here's where it's going to be, and go and take it. And it's like, do I truly, like, at the time, it was after that happened, I was like, you know what? Like, what am I doing? I need to focus on either my gyms or the franchise, and what the demands were coming back were, hey, here's this, what now I'm going to have to do for the gyms. So as a result of that, I ended up essentially removing myself from the gyms and selling the gyms to employees. So I was like, hey, you know what? Here's what happened in this business. Here's what's going to be needed over the next couple of years. Here's what this focus is going to be. I had to choose 1 or 2 of those. And I also knew that, at least at the time, I was like, I don't want to do that. It's not giving me the passion, this imbalance. I got burnout. How can I prevent the burnout? I need to then focus on this thing. So I need to put my attention here, but also I need to do stuff that I want to do, so, I need to improve upon these other areas. So, I figured, hey, this happened, but why did it happen? Well, 1, I got burnt out. 2, I did build an awesome business, but I didn't put attention quick enough or early enough, essentially to get out of my own way and focus on those weak areas of mine. And then also I let myself get distracted, and not making that shift, even though, again, I had also heard like, hey, you really need to focus on one or the other, so that's early on. I was like, hey, I needed to focus on one or the other. It's too difficult. I've heard this, and maybe there's some franchises that have done it, but, and I think some have actually gone back, but it was like difficult. It's really tough to run like corporate and then also run, the franchise stuff, because there's such different demands. So those are really those three areas that kind of occurred. So I was like, all right, cool, this happened. So how do I change it? And how can I make it so it doesn't happen again? And as a result of all that happening, what seemed devastating was like, how the fuck do I come back from this? You're like, oh, all right, actually, everything's better now. Everything is improved now. All right. It's like, look at all areas. So it's not just like, hey, here's this one area, business, success, financial. It's like, hey, we got financial, we got faith, we got family, we got relationships, we got self. Like all those areas now are focal points that have grown. And then as a result of focusing on those other areas, then everything else has grown with it. So it's an interesting thing that actually occurred for me. And I'm hopeful that, I think that, especially if you're in business, you're getting started or you're scaling, there are going to be seasons where like you have to have that be your sole focus. However, what I learned is you have to be, from my experience, like you have to be careful on making it your identity. And when it then becomes your identity, one, it gets difficult to see where your weaknesses are, where you're struggling, where you're making mistakes, like that I was having. Or you start maybe making decisions to later, not rationally or whatever, that's going to be in the best interest of yourself. So you have to be careful. And that's one of the things I learned was like, hey, I can't have this be my identity. It's not who I'm made up of. These are these other areas that, define me, so to speak. And those are the areas that I'm going to work on. And then as a result, that's what I ended up working on. And that's also why I'm speaking into a camera right now. And you're either watching this or on YouTube or listening to it. So that was probably one of the biggest lessons that I've gotten. And it was, again, it's repeat it. Things aren't done to you, they're done for you. And definitely as a result of this, amazing things have happened. So I hope you got enjoyment out of today. Hope you learned something. Hope it was valuable. If you did enjoy it, the only thing that I ask is that you share it. Actually, I'll make another ask too. And if you could, leave a review if you haven't yet or anything like that. However, mostly if you found this helpful and you think that there's another person that will find it helpful, please share it with them. All right. Until next time, catch you later.
Hey, thanks for spending your time with me today. I made this show to help people just like you overcome the challenges and adversity that come with entrepreneurship. So if you know someone that could truly benefit from today's show, please be sure to share this episode with them. Thanks again, and I'll see you next week on Unleashing Greatness.